Good evening from the south of Israel. This is Laser Brody with another session of Emuna Hour. Tonight, Be'ezrat Hashem, we're learning the 10th principle of Emuna, which is omniscience and divine direction. Principle 10 says in the language of Maimonides, language of the Rambam, I believe with complete belief that the Creator, blessed be his name, knows all the actions of every human and all their thoughts. As it is said in Psalms 33, he produces the hearts of them and discerns all of their thoughts. So Hashem not only produces our hearts, but he knows everything that's in our hearts and in our brains. It's all there in front. And some people, it's difficult to believe, Well, someone, wait a second, were you on the computer today? So sure. And did you use Google search today? Yeah, Google. How can Mr. Google know what's going on and all through the world, everything? It's got all this information bank. Oh, yeah, but that's, you can't think. Artificial intelligence, it's really artificial intelligence because it can't think. It's just a bunch of algorithms that you put in a particular topic and tells you what's being said about that anywhere. But that's not what Hashem. Hashem knows exactly what our motivation is, what we're thinking, where we've been, where we want to go. He produced all of us. So this is the belief in Hashem's omniscience. Hashem knows everything that's going on. This is difficult. Again, our principles of Emuna are difficult for us to fathom as long as our souls are trapped into this jail, this prison of flesh and blood. Once our souls leave the prison of flesh and blood, right away knows the truth and know everything. So where we lack cognizance, where we can't see with our own eyes, then we believe. And that's what we say with Emuna. Emuna begins where logic and leaves off. Okay, so we're talking about Hashem's omniscience. Not only that, it's not that Hashem knows everything and Hashem put the world in automatic pilot. Hashem's divine direction determines everything. And no thought, utterance, or occurrence in the universe is unknown to him. He knows everything. So we're going to talk about the spiritual GPS right now. What's a GPS? To explain how Hashem's omniscience work. What does it mean to us? And how does that work together with this divine providence, which we prefer to call divine direction? Imagine that Hashem is the GPS in your car. You get in your car, you put on your GPS, you hook it on. That's Hashem. And this shows you the way your destination. In fact, we could really call the 10th principle of Emuna the GPS because it's God's personal supervision of our lives and everything we do and all of creation on a macro level, on a micro level, on a global level, and on a personal level. Hashem decides everything that's going on in our lives. Hashem decides each cell differentiation in our body. What we had for dinner, Hashem decides what is going to be part of our protein chain, and amino acid that becomes part of our muscle, and the other part that becomes waste that goes out the other side. This is all Hashem. Personally, this mind-boggling Hashem's personal supervision. So Hashem's GPS, God's personal supervision, is very, very advanced. It knows everything that's occurring on the road between your point of embarkation and your destination. So when calculating your route, it takes everything into consideration. Everything into consideration. People that, for example, take something like life and death. Maybe a person, because of his or her actions, doesn't deserve to live. This is an important message for the month of Elul. We're getting ready the whole month for Rosh Hashanah. But the person does good for other people. Maybe in himself, the person does all types of things behind closed doors, not good. But as far as his relations to other people, he does good to other people. He helps support the poor. He's a good husband, and he's a good father, and he's loyal at work. He does certain things that he shouldn't do. Okay, but before Hashem punishes him, maybe he doesn't even do things that the Torah requires the death penalty. Hashem will not take him from this earth if it causes too much anguish to other people that they don't deserve it. In other words, if the other people, they deserve the anguish, okay, he'll take them. But if other people will suffer unnecessarily because this person leaves the world, Hashem takes everything into consideration. That's why it's important to do good by other people, to do charitable deeds. Be good, because it helps, especially when we're on a trial in Rosh Hashanah for our life and death. We all want to get judged on the judgment day. So Hashem takes everything into consideration, and Hashem's GPS, it knows where the radar traps are, and knows where every hole in the road is, every pitfall that a person might encounter, and it sees where the traffic jams are, and it sees where the open roads are. But more than that, Hashem's GPS sees in the imagery of the GPS in your car, Hashem's GPS sees the thoughts of the other driver. If the other driver is going to dangerously cut you off, or if he's going to pass a solid white line, and if he's paying attention to his driving, or looking at his text messages and not paying attention to the road. And it also takes into account your state of mind and your thoughts, whether you're paying attention to the road. Hashem takes everything into account. So we're not finished yet. Let's not finish this. Just stop and think. If we ponder each one of these thoughts, I'm going fast because there's a lot of ground to cover. But we ponder each one of these thoughts. Wow, it spins our head. So the GPS, while it's taking you on your route, it's calculated ways to avoid nails on the road. Hashem knows that a certain road, there will be a nail in that road. And if you go on that road, that nail is going to puncture your tire. And you may have a blowout. Sometimes with a severe blowout, the car can turn around, completely turn over, and make it a potential hazard, an accident. And Hashem knows where there's jaywalking pedestrians. So all of a sudden you'll be driving and you're doing the speed limit, 30 miles an hour in the city. But even 30 miles an hour is very fast if someone right away crosses the street in the middle of the street between two parked cars. You don't see him, and you're 30 miles an hour, and it's right a couple of meters in front of the person. Hashem sees all these types of perils, and the perils would have ruined your trip. So sometimes you say, well, wait a second. Why is there a detour on the road and I got to go around the other way? Or all of a sudden a policeman's got a blocked road. The road is blocked off for some reason. And a person is full of complaints. Why can't I go? And there's a traffic jam here. And a policeman says there's been an accident. Take an alternate route. You're all kinds of upset because if you'd gone straight, you'd have been in your destination for 5 minutes. And this way you got to do a big detour in 15 minutes. That's not the accident. That's not the policeman. That's Hashem. Hashem, for some reason, is giving you a delay, giving you a detour. That's Hashem's GPS. So when we consider our 10th principle, when every time we have a delay in life, we have something that looked like a seeming setback, that's our GPS, God's personal supervision. That's Hashem taking us to the route we need to go, which is the best for us. So we're not even aware. We can see our GPS, or if somebody has Waze, it sees, there's a radar trap, and they warned him that there's a policeman here, and there's a camera that's going to take a picture if you go through the red light. But we're not even aware of what Hashem is doing all the time. So I'm doing things we can't even begin to understand, begin to believe, and we take them for granted because we don't know about them. So especially if it's a routine trip. Let's say you go the same trip to work, you have a 15-minute drive to work or a 10-minute walk to school. It looks like routine. And somebody says, you'd say, heaven forbid, he says, I don't need a Hashem. I can take it. I do the walk every day. Oh, you certainly do. That's why every day, why do we have a mezuzah on the front door? And we kiss the mezuzah when we leave the front door, and we kiss the mezuzah when we come back. Because everything requires prayer before you get in the car. Before you go anywhere, it's the same thing. You go, how many work days a year? 270, 260 work days a year. Do the same thing every day. Don't take it for granted. Don't let routine take it for granted. Hashem, let me get there peacefully. How many things happen? The car could break down. A drunk driver, someone, a terrorist on the road. You can see there's all types of crazy things going on. Don't take it for granted. Anytime we leave the house, Hashem, help me get to the destination. Hashem, be with me on my way. Hashem, don't leave me. Hashem, I cannot cross the street without your help. Is everything crossing a crosswalk? Most I'd walk everywhere I need. Not to come to crossing a street. Who knows if out of nowhere come a big truck and go through, do not pay attention to crosswalk. You see this all the time, especially in Israel. People, they go through crosswalks, and the driver thinks he's got the right of way. So you take a look, you be careful. Hashem, let me cross the street. And not only that, look at the driver's eyes, see what they're doing. We try to anticipate what they're doing, but Hashem knows what they're going to do. So he said, Hashem, I can't anticipate whether he's all of a sudden going to put his foot on the gas. Things have happened. And people who've had the right of way, they've, heaven forbid, they've been damaged. There's an old expression about traffic that the guy had on his tombstone written, but I had the right of way. No, you don't have the right of way. Ask Hashem to help you go. We need to go. It's not, we can't make a foregone conclusion, cannot take anything for granted. And this principle encourages us to live with Hashem. To live the 10th principle, we're with Hashem all day long. It's not just some high in the sky principle. It's Hashem is with us. Hashem's our GPS. What's more, sometimes you ever been in the car, you've been angry at the GPS and you yell at it? Hey, you said a GPS. How come you took me on Route 495 instead of my usual 295? GPS said, no, you're not going on 295 today. You're going on 495. But 495, that's the Beltway, and it's all this traffic, and 295 is a closer route. No, but if you're fortunate, Hashem does you a favor that you get home and you're on the 7 p.m. news that a semi-trailer and a bus were involved on a terrible collision on 295 just at the same hour that you were supposed to pass through there. So, wow, now, oh, you're really ashamed. Hashem, how could I doubt you? How could I doubt you? What was it? A shame? That sounds like Hashem. Okay, Hashem gives us shame when we forget Hashem. So we forget Hashem, we get shame. So we have the shame. Okay, Hashem, how could I doubt you? Right there. This is for someone who's really lucky. And Hashem shows, after the fact, shows that person, look what I did for you. That's a big favor. That's a big favor. And Hashem does right away. Person says Psalm 100, Mizmor Todah. Thank you, Hashem. Say thank you to Hashem. So Hashem's GPS, God's personal supervision, it is a fantastic model. And give me an example. Look at your own body, not in the road. Okay, your own body. You're sitting at home. You're sitting in the office. You're so busy. You haven't paid attention to your own body. So if your body doesn't have enough fluid, your GPS in the body, it's going to send a thirst message to your throat that you'll drink water. Wait a second. Why is my throat raspy? Oh, look, I haven't had water. So I'm going to grab my bottle of water. Thank you, Hashem. This is the message for the GPS. And what happens if your body needs vitamin C and you don't know? You go to the supermarket and all of a sudden you see these bright golden oranges. And say, but great old oranges. And you go crazy. Your mouth salivates and this. You really have an urge for that. Your body said, come on, bring me some vitamin C. We're low on vitamin C. Pick it up. So this is the GPS. Makes you yearn for a fresh tangerine or a glass of home squeezed orange juice. And the list of the GPS, God's personal supervision, functions in our lives is endless. Just open our eyes and see everything that is going on with us. It's all Hashem's personal supervision. So who's that Hashem that's personally supervising us? He's the creator. And the creator is the manufacturer. And a manufacturer made us manufacturers. Every manufacturer gives the owner's manual. New car, new washing machine, get the owner's manual. So the 10th principle, it teaches us that Hashem is much more than the GPS in our lives. Hashem's also our manufacturer. He produced us. He made each one of us inside and out. He made each one of us the physical aspect of us. He made each of the soul. The soul. It is mind-boggling to think that Hashem is almighty as he is, as vast as he can, it's infinitely vast, where the nova super galaxies are a pinpoint for Hashem. They're nothing. They're nothing. And we're not even a pinpoint in the solar system, much less as super galaxies. So Hashem, hold it. Look how Hashem filters down and called Tzimtzum in Kabbalah, the constriction. Hashem constricts himself all the way down through worlds and worlds. And if we're talking mathematics, we're talking about the minus zillionth power. It's so in such macro, and Hashem is sitting there deciding that tonight a baby is going to be conceived and a certain seed will meet a certain egg. And Hashem is configuring the chromosomes, how that final chromosome map, he takes a chromosome and moves it 1 nanomicron along the DNA chain. Crazy. And that's going to determine whether the baby's going to be strong or weak, whether he's going to have blue eyes or brown eyes, whether the baby's going to have dark skin or light skin, red hair or brown hair. This Hashem determining everything. So mind-boggling. And this is what the prophet Isaiah yells at us before Tisha B'Av. He said, not that we did the things, he said, Ami lo bonan, that my nation doesn't observe. If we would take only this 10th principle of Emuna and the concept of the GPS, God's personal supervision, and just ponder that, everybody would have Emuna. Everybody would be close to Hashem. Everybody would realize. But we walk through like spaced out, Lucy in the sky with diamonds, head up in this cloud, and not pay attention to what's happening in our own lives. We're not talking about in the greater world. We're talking about our own lives. So that reason that the Rambam, when he states the 10th principle, he supports this tenet. We'll quote King David. The Rambam does that, only does that here in the 10th principle. He brings a passage from Psalms. We didn't see that the Rambam did that any other of the 13 principles, only in the 10th. And he quotes Psalm 33, verse 15, and he says, he, Hashem, produces the hearts of them and discerns all their doings. So Hashem produces both dimensions of a creation, the manifest physical side, what we all can see with our eyes, and which is the body, we know it as the body, and the invisible spiritual side, which we call the soul, body and soul. So every creation on all 4 levels, there's 4 levels of creations, the mineral, the plant, the animal, and the human. They all have a physical side and a spiritual side. That's what we explained in our introductory lesson to go back. And we talked about how the nefesh, ruach, and the neshama, the nefesh, the basic animal soul, it's a basic creation soul. Everyone has that. Even a tree has this basic soul. It's a life force. But then ruach, only humans have it. And that's a speech. And the neshama, that only a person that observes Hashem's command has a neshama, that's the godly soul. Because a person can't merit. The godly soul will not exist within a person that disdains Torah. And so they of course they don't have Emuna, but they don't have the wherewithal to discern Hashem's light. For that, we need the neshama, the godly soul. Okay, so you could go back and see our 2 introductory lessons, explain this all completely. I don't want to go back to review that too much because we have to move forward the 10th principle. So we see Hashem created both sides of creation, the physical side and the spiritual side. And Hashem knows everything about that particular creation, what that creation is doing and what that creation is thinking and the aspirations and the hopes of that creation, everything. So let's go a step further. We're talking about GPS. People think that, that the Torah is outdated. The Torah is not high tech. It's behind high tech. High tech is primitive compared to Torah. We mentioned, and last week we talked about Louis Pasteur, how because of the wisdom of the Gemara, Louis Pasteur was able to discover vaccines. It goes much further. In the 10th principle, we see that the Chafetz Chaim, Rabbi Yisrael Meir HaKohen Kagan, it says he lived to the age of 95. Hashem took him in 1933, right before the Nazis came to power, because he didn't want the Chafetz Chaim to see the Holocaust. Chafetz Chaim knew it was coming, but he didn't want the tzaddik to suffer by seeing the Holocaust. So he wrote back in his day that the entire purpose of technological advances is to strengthen our belief in divine providence. And that he says that in Shem Olam at the end of the book. Well, the telescope teaches us that Hashem's universe in macro is way greater than the naked eye can see. So the microscope, the telescope, that's the world in macro. The microscope is the world in micro. The more we develop high-powered microscopes, the more we discover that there's more to creation than we think they are. We all get lower. People, I don't know when DNA and RNA were discovered. It's not that long ago. not that long ago. It's a relatively new discussion, but then about atoms and splitting atoms. And Hashem, he creates the eye that sees and the ear that hears. And you can see, even though I think people like me that have hearing aids, it's a very sophisticated hearing aid. It's good. Since I started wearing the hearing aids, had to change them about 3 times, 4 times, and now they're much more sophisticated. As sophisticated as they are, nowhere near the quality of human hearing. And as good as a person's eyeglasses are, nowhere near the human eye that doesn't need, with 20/20 vision, that doesn't need any help. Nowhere near. And take a young person, that the eye muscles are still flexible, the way a young person could focus. An older person has more difficulty focusing because the muscles in the eyes, they harden. Okay, David Dome could explain this much better than I can. That's his profession. But we see this is what happens, that we have everything gets hard, gets more stiff, gets less flexible as we get older. So what happens at this point? King David chastises the wicked people that they think they could get away with hurting other people, robbing and exploiting people as if nobody knows what they're doing. They're talking about that. We just spoke a few minutes before the lesson and speaking to Jacob Lund about some type of big injustice. But people, Jacob has a special sense, again, of indignation of injustice. He can't stand to see the injustice. And if we know that the good people among us can't stand injustice, oh, Hashem does not like it. Hashem doesn't like when one person hurts another person. Now, when a person thinks that he or she could get away with damaging other people, and this is why the Chafetz Chaim, he wrote the book about slander, Lashon Hara, the Chafetz Chaim, he who seeks life. That's he's nicknamed after his famous book. That's the laws of wholesome speech. For a person cannot speak slander and gossip unless subconsciously denies Hashem. You could say a person would be a believer. He could sit in the front of the synagogue, one of the highbrows with his high hat and robe, and then talk about other people. Excuse me, what you're doing, sir, that goes against Torah. Not only that, slander involves transgressing 31 commandments of Torah at one fell swoop. First, there's 70 different negative commandments, 14 positive commandments. So what do you put right? Oh no, but I'm right about that. No, the Chafetz Chaim says slander is even if a person is accurate, person says something detrimental about the person, maybe it's true. Okay, but if it's not true, then the person is going to be it'll be libel in addition to slander. Libel is to say something that's not true. Libel. That's something that's not true. So, but in order for a person to make a transgression, unless it's an accidental transgression, a thoughtless transgression, it first is a denial of the 10th principle, particularly, and Hashem generally. Okay, because the person says, Hashem doesn't see what I'm doing. Either there's no Hashem or else he doesn't see, both of which are denying Hashem, both of which are atheism, and it's terrible to say something like that. So King David says, he says, fools, what are you going to hear? And he says, he who created the ear, he doesn't understand. He created the ear. So he says, fools, what are you going to understand? So he who created the eye, he won't see. So Hashem's hearing and sight record everything everywhere better than any Google search engine, better than anything on the web, and better than the most sophisticated surveillance system, and better than, I don't know, Bill Gates as artificial intelligence or whatever. A satellite surveillance camera and Google search, they record and document knowledge, but only where they're looking. Google can't record anything about someone that's not on a computer. Okay, they can't, surveillance can't record anything about someone that's not on the web. If you have a little flip phone and local thing, they can't listen in. They can only listen in on something that's on the web. And it says people that, they walk around with these little kosher flip phones, they save themselves a lot of grief. is that then they don't become an algorithm on some government website where the government all of a sudden picks up everything and knows everything about them because sees what their interests are and sees where they. Well, all of a sudden you look on your computer and you get thrown these advertisements that you've been looking to for a vacation in Portugal. All of a sudden they throw you in, rent a car in Portugal. What? I didn't ask for that. How did they know that? Because you've been searching the web for a vacation in Portugal, and this goes into the knowledge bank, and now they do it. And then the next thing, your wife is going to get fashioned, what the styles in Portugal are now, and how to dress on vacation, all types of different things. So, but they only know because you've showed them. They have someplace to look. They don't know this automatically. They cannot know this. Only Hashem can know this without you being on the web, without you accessing, with just the information being in your mind and in your heart. And only Hashem could do that. There's no technology that can read a person's mind and read a person's heart because technology it's mechanical. It's sort of limited. Hashem is not limited. Hashem is omniscient. And this is what the prophet Zechariah says in chapter 4, verse 10. That the eyes of Hashem cruise the entire earth all the time. There's surveillance on everything, again, and macro and in micro. And Jeremiah the prophet says his eyes are open to the ways of man. That Hashem sees everything. And King David says in Psalm 121, the famous passage, the guardian of Israel never sleeps or slumbers. Hashem has never fallen asleep on guard. So the closer we get to Mashiach, the more Hashem enables the revelations of technology in order to realize the omniscience and divine providence. It's not that technology is getting smarter. This is what the Chafetz Chaim teaches us. Hashem is releasing more knowledge so that people start looking, wait a second, where does that come from? And they realize it comes from Hashem. It comes from Hashem. So by observing the creations, we learn more about the Creator. In fact, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, he begins his magnum opus, Likutei Moran, that we learned Rabbi Nachman's teachings on Thursday night. He says that a person should search, and in discourse number 1, part 1, Rabbi Nachman says that each of us should search for the underlying wisdom in every creation, because by looking for the underlying wisdom in every creation, we get close to Hashem. Because that creation, all wisdom, King Solomon tells us all through Proverbs, that only true wisdom comes from Hashem. There's no wisdom outside of Hashem. Which is if people want, a nuclear physicist doesn't have wisdom, a heart surgeon doesn't have wisdom, some great professional, the astrophysicist doesn't have wisdom. No, they're like technicians. They're a technician, just like the plumber, the mechanic. But it's on one level of technology, of technician, and there's a more sophisticated level of technician. But how many times you remember those of us who've been in university have a professor emeritus of some certain faculty, and the president goes with untied shoes or use foul language. And we all had professors like that. A professor with low lives, or professors that would lay a hand on a female student. All types of that. That's not. Wisdom comes from Hashem. Wisdom comes from the Torah, because any true wisdom comes from the divine wisdom, Chachma, Bina, and Dat, the three spheres of divine wisdom. Okay, so take a really sophisticated, an Intel, which is made here in Israel, the i7 computer processor, all right, and its use of multi-threading technology. Hey, why does Hashem do that? Multi-threading technology. Where do we learn multi-threading technology? Learn the dynamics of the brain. Learn the physiology of the brain. The brain is much more, it's much more sophisticated technology than the computer processor. The multi-threading in the brain is much more sophisticated than a computer processor, and it's a lot more effective than a computer processor, and a lot more intricate, because the human operating system, it's stronger and it's more durable and much more effective than the best computer operating system. Look at the life of your processor today. It used to be in the first days of processors. I remember the and before the i3 even. i3, you could get a good 6, 7 years, 8 years from your computer. Now, no longer 3, 4 years. 4 years if you're really lucky. That they think that. And look what a person goes and thinks. We say, wait a second, no, they get ruined. They get Alzheimer's when they're on. Visit, come to Israel and visit a Haredi old age home in Jerusalem and watch how the 90-year-olds that they all have walkers and they're sitting and they're learning Gemara like on fire. Where they use their mind, when the minds are active, what happens when minds have dementia? When they sit in the active mode in front of a TV set. The body, when it's active mode, the body has dementia also. The body degenerates a lot faster. But a person who works out, a person who can work out, he can maintain his muscle mass well into the 80s and even to the early 90s. It doesn't degenerate. But if a person that just the body begins natural degeneration at age 35, it depends how a person uses his body and how a person uses mind. So I say people that study, people that learn, especially Torah scholars, go through a long list of Rabbi Vosner lived till 103, Rabbi Avad Yosef, all well in their 90s. You can see people that in their 90s and 100 years, the Chazon Ish went way past 100, Rabbi Shlem Zalman Auerbach, 102. People that lived till long age, that they were sharp right until the end. Rabbi Leib Steinman, I think Leib Steinman made it to 104. And they were sharp right until the end. And you can see because their minds are all the time working. So you can see the mind used the way Hashem wants the mind to be used, with it's focused on a book, not on a screen. By the way, be very careful of screens. Yesterday, Leo Grossman told me when we spoke, he said the blue light in a screen is more addictive than crack. And people don't realize that they go into like kyphosis. They cannot take their eyes away from the screen. And it's so dangerous. They can run over the car. They don't look across the street, go to the crosswalk, not only say, Hashem, help me. They can't speak to Hashem because they can't take away their attention from the cell phone. They're so addictive. And such people, they have really difficulty keeping Shabbat. At least if they do keep Shabbat, then they're lucky enough to have one day of vacation. But this is really difficult for them. It's even worse than a smoker, more addictive than nicotine. So you have to be very careful and use Hashem's creations the way Hashem wants us to. And that's why this Torah is simply Hashem's guideline to how to use our lives. And so there's a difference between a human being and the mind that Hashem gave us. And there's all these machines, computers. Computers cannot reason. They can only spit out what they say, what's in comes out. People can reason. And the power of human reason, where does that come from? That comes from the soul. That comes from the divine soul, which is a tiny spark of Hashem. So the purpose of technology, as the Chofetz Chaim teaches us, is to help us realize how vast Hashem is and how infinite and omniscient his divine providence is. And this is what Hosea the prophet reminds us, that the ways of Hashem are just and the righteous walk in them, but the transgressors stumble on them. The same exact thing, the Gemara says this all through, that the same exact sunlight, that the righteous, they get a nice suntan, but the evil, they burn in that sunlight. That's Hashem's light. So when the righteous look at technology, what happens when a righteous person looks at technology? It's awed and humbled. And what does a righteous person say? It says he's looking about, he hears about this new Capella 2 synthetic aperture radar. It's called SAR. It's a satellite spy camera. It's something that the secret services of major countries use. And it can penetrate walls. This is something that can take a picture of something going on behind a concrete wall. And it's only a creation. So what that could do, you take a certain satellite, and the satellite that has an SAR spy camera called this Capella 2, and it could go down into a bunker, deep bunker in some desert in Iran, and see what these nuclear scientists are doing 80 meters below the ground behind 8 feet of concrete. It's a mind-boggling. So if this is what technology could do, a technology could think, what can a creator do? The creator do? It says it right here. We see it in the second chapter of Ethics of the Fathers. We learn Ethics of the Fathers all summer long. Every Shabbat we learn another chapter. In chapter 2, the Ethics of the Fathers, the Mishnah says, the eye sees and the ear hears, for all your deeds are recorded in a book. This was said 1900 years ago, 2000 years ago. So neither Google search nor Capella space program can make that claim. They can't make that claim that everything is recorded. They can only record what they're looking at. They don't know. And that's why they have all these satellites up, each satellite focused on something else. But like the Hosea the prophet warns, the transgressors stumble on their own technology feats to think that they run the world, to think that it's the might of their right hand, that they're cunning, and that they create media outlets and corporations that are more powerful than governments and use them to wield power and uproot Torah values. Take somebody, a scoundrel, somebody evil, like George Soros, that uses all his billions of dollars to fund all these terrorist organizations. It's really terrible. The BDS and anti-Semitism. Here he is, a self-hating Jew that funds anti-Semitism, but he thinks his $1 billion run the world. Don't be jealous of George Soros and his money. Don't be jealous of the wicked. And this again, what the tractate of Ethics of the Fathers tells us, Pirkei Avot, that don't hold the stopwatch in Hashem's face. Al tityesh min haponut. That says 4 words. It says, don't be upset. Don't be disappointed when you see that Hashem is inactive. Hashem is not inactive, but Hashem is waiting for the person to dig himself a deep enough hole. Hashem decides when this person digs a 6-foot hole in the ground, he'd be buried. Well, the person's only dug 4.5 feet. Okay, so he's going to dig his own grave. Hashem let him dig another, do some more evil, keep going, and then he gets the throne book. And all of a sudden, the Chofetz Chaim, who writes about technology, people came to the Chofetz Chaim, and they were so upset. There was this really rich miser in Radin in south in North Belarus, South Lithuania. So it depends on what war. It was sometimes part of Belarus, sometimes part of Lithuania. And he was a slumlord. He was a slumlord in the Chofetz Chaim's day. And he had all these dilapidated shacks, and he rented them out to poor people. But they were exorbitant rents. He was a European slumlord, a shtetl slumlord. So the one time there was this winter that was really difficult winter, snowy winter. A widow and her son, the widow would make a living. She lived by the main road in this dilapidated shack that the slumlord owned, that she rented from him. And she made a meager living by selling whiskey. She had a barrel. She'd buy a barrel of whiskey and add to it by selling whiskey to the travelers. And the traveler, a cold day, they'd stop and they'd get some a nice shot, warm themselves on the way. Well, this year was so terrible blizzards. There were no travelers on the road. So she didn't have any money. She came looking for the rent. And she says, I'm sorry, look at the winter. I make my living I had this little tavern on the road and I don't have any customers. So he says, I don't care. He says, I'm not a free aid society. You owe me the rent. He says, either give the rent in another week or you're out. Well, she didn't have the wherewithal to pay the rent. He took the widow and her son and he threw them out in the snow with all their possessions. Well, the town of Radin were up in arms. They were up in arms. They came to Chofetz Chaim. How can Hashem allow this evil? We talked about injustice, such injustice, taking this poor widow, this slumlord. He's got so much, hundreds of thousands, but who knows how many rubles, how many millions of rubles. Who knows he's got, and he throw this widow and her orphan son out in the snow. It was a talk of the town. Chofetz Chaim said, quoted the Ethics of the Fathers, Al tityesh meponut. Okay, don't be impatient with Hashem. Don't be impatient with them. 22 years went by. 22 years later, A rabid dog came into town. And we talked last week, I recognize a rabid dog. Walks on the side of the road, its tail is down, its ears are droopy, and it looks like a gate. It's walking sideways. Well, the rabid dog made a direct beeline, like they say at Monopoly, didn't pass go, didn't collect $200, made a direct beeline to the mansion of the miser. And they walked into the front door, went and bit the miser, bit him in the leg. Well, there was no cure for rabies back then, and he had a terrible, terrible, excruciating death. He finally died, and the Chofetz Chaim, this was a year before the Chofetz Chaim died, 1932. And the Chofetz Chaim says, when people asked him, Rebbe, how did you merit this long life? He was 94 at the time. He passed when he was 95 in 1933. He says, I merited long life for Hashem to show me the completion of circles. They're going to be completed. That this one thing Hashem wanted him to see, that he wouldn't have any question. And the Chofetz Chaim did this for his beloved son. And Hashem does this something for us. He lets us see these things in the end. And this really encourages our Emuna. Well, the Chofetz Chaim had fantastic Emuna, but there was even more encouraging, so it could teach us from us. So that this happened at 1933, so we're talking about 92 years later, we could tell this on Emuna Hour. But that right there. And so this is what the Hosea the prophet warns, that the wicked are going to stumble on their own transgression of Torah values. So they do everything to paint the Torah and the Torah's loyal observers as primitive and paint themselves as enlightened. We have this right here today in Israel. So nevertheless, they're just as senseless, as inane, as the people 3,800 years ago that built the Tower of Babel. They did the Tower of Babel. They said, we're going to go up and make a revolution against Hashem. And it's no small coincidence that the global leader of high tech is also the global trendsetter of moral decadence. In social economic structure, it's a severe decline. Don't be jealous. You're going to see this. It's not everything, all the Google and Amazon and all these corporations, okay. Better invest in Emuna. Emuna is a much better stock, especially since you need to invest in it right now before Mashiach comes. So like everything else in creation, Hashem gives us technology, but it's our free choice to use it productively and responsibly. Okay, so to help us internalize the 10th principle and to fill our Emuna, I'm going to tell you two stories about divine providence. And this is really encouraging. Sometimes you get a story and it really brings it home. This is something Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky, who was the great previous generation, he left us a few short years ago. And a boy with a terrible scar on his face, he came to see Rabbi Chaim. Now the boy, he was one of the best boys in his yeshiva. And he complained, he said there plenty of it, because such a good boy in yeshiva, and he was offered a lot of matches, but he never had a second date. Never had a second date. The first date, and then it would be canceled. Because every girl that looked at him and saw the scar face, she was horrified. So Rabbi Chaim listened to him patiently, and he gave him a blessing that the next shidduch, the coming match offering, it should be fruitful. And he said, tell the next girl you go out with how you got those scars. Well, he said he could understand what Rabbi Chaim was talking about. He said, Rebbe, what do you mean? I should right away call attention to my scarred face? At least they may give me a chance to speak to her, but right away scare her away? She's sure to run away. So Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky reassured the young man. He smiled patiently. We got to listen to our sages. And he heeded the Rebbe's advice. So the next date, before talking about anything else, he said to the young lady, he says, before we continue, I have to explain something. He said, do you remember a few years ago when there was an intifada? Intifada is the Arab word for uprising. Intifada in Jerusalem, when Arabs went on a stabbing rampage. We're talking about the 1990s. 1990s, there were all the time, you walk through the streets of Jerusalem, every day there was a stabbing incident. and people were walking around with tear gas, and people that's really learning hand to hand that became really popular, and people had to defend themselves. But this was a really difficult time, very difficult. It's around the middle of the 2009, the end of the from about 1988 to for about 10 years. Okay, so the boy tells the girl, he says, I was walking home from yeshiva in the old city, and I heard this terrible scream. And he says, I'm not a fighter or a hero. I learned Torah. I'm a yeshiva student. So I ran in the direction of the scream, and I found an Arab wielding a knife in the face of a terrified young Jewish girl. Well, I let out a war cry right away, a Geronimo war cry, like an Indian. And I shouted to the Arab to let the girl go. Let her go. And without thinking, I jumped on the Arab. So meanwhile, she ran away. She escaped. But the Arab slashed my face several times with the knife. And I fought him with all my strength. And I don't know where Hashem gave me the strength. And he ran away too. He could have killed me. But Hashem didn't let that happen. Well, the young man took a deep breath. And he continued his narrative. He says, I tried all kinds of plastic surgery to get rid of the scars, but nothing helped. They're so deep. And he says, I know that my face is ugly and scary, but I think maybe I made it worse by trying the surgery. So he said to her, I'm sorry for upsetting you, but I know I'm horrible to look at. But Rabbi Chaim Kanevsky, he told me that to tell the next girl I meet how I got these scars. So the girl's lips were quivering. And all of a sudden she burst out in tears. So, man, so he says, I'm sorry, I upset you. Why are you crying? And she said to him, I was that girl. She cried through her tears. She said, you saved my life. She looked at him, but she didn't see any scars. She saw her heroic bashert, her heroic intended mate, and that was her intended partner for life. So, wow. The above story, this story tells us that Hashem's divine providence so profoundly governs not only the milestones of our life, but the tiny details in life, bringing two soulmates together. Stop and think about your own soulmate. You think, oh, this is just some story that Chaim Kanevsky would. Stop and think of how normal life you would not have met your soulmate. And Hashem made all these different circumstances and put you in a different set of circumstances, in a different profession, a different school, a different town, a different circle of friends. And in this new place where you couldn't understand what Hashem's doing to you, why is Hashem making you move? Why is Hashem making you change your jobs? Why is Hashem, all of a sudden you lost your friends and there's something seemingly bad. And you have new friends and new friends. And your soulmate is part of this new group of friends. Otherwise, if you would have stayed in your comfort zone, you'd have never met her. Okay, this Hashem does all types of things. Every single one of us stop and think about Hashem brought you together. And think of these things. I see such people, for example, I'm sure, I hope Avigail is not married, represent Avigail. Okay, I knew Avigail way back in Miami, but now, if I told Avigail 10 years ago, maybe when we first met, that she's going to be a Rebbetzin in Jerusalem, what? Mother, you can see the odyssey, the circumstances Hashem did. And Hashem brought her across the Atlantic from Florida, the families from Latin America, and then they brought her from Miami across the Atlantic and to come here. And now she lives in Israel, and she's married to a great guy, and she's a mother. That's amazing. Thank you, Avigail. Right here, it's just I look at it. I can look one by one. I could get the stories about Baruch Hashem. No, everybody, but could go one by one, and the stories that know about your own lives that come to know each other. So you could see. I want to tell you a story. I know that I was witness to. This happened right here in Ashdod. Okay, now before. Even now, before that, Gaza has been neutralized the most part. For years, since 2008, we live in Gaza, where we live in Ashdod, and it's not far from Gaza. And from time to time, get bombarded from Gaza. We spend a lot of missile fire. Uh, we live 18 minutes drive from the Gaza border. In Ashkelon, it's only a 9-minute drive. Okay, they get even worse than us. In Shderot, it's a 5-minute drive. So if it takes 15 seconds for a Katyusha rocket to go from Gaza to Shderot, and 20 seconds to Ashkelon, it takes a whole 30 seconds, 32 seconds to hit the south of Ashdod. Well, that's what went through, and there are plenty of Shabbatot and taking cover and bomb shelters, going through all types of things. Okay, now we have in Israel the red alert alarm system. The red alert alarm system is very, very good. It picks up a rocket or a missile as soon as it's fired, and can also predict its trajectory and know where it's going to land. And it doesn't just go for all the country. The particular area, the siren goes off where a general area where that is about to land. So this is something we became very, very used to. And the kids go in the street and they get so used to it, they imitate the sirens all day long. They're really unnerving. It has every time you hear a motorcycle in first gear, it sounds like the siren's about to go off. This is well, like Pavlov's dog with that red alert siren. Okay, one time we were under attack from Gaza, and there was in the Port Authority, this in the north of Ashdod, where the port is, they erected these igloos. We call them igloos. They're concrete. They look like igloos, but they're concrete portable shelters. And it's a long place for a longshoreman who's in a crane unloading a ship, unloading these containers from the ships at the Ashdod port, to go all the way back into a port warehouse, into a bomb shelter. So they made these portable bomb shelters, these big igloos, where about a dozen or 15 longshoremen could take cover. They go up the cranes, they run, it's right there, and it's no more than a 15 second run. Right away, they have to get off the cranes and go. So one time, this after the red alert system, it literally foolproof. It works fantastic. There's one time that the port of Ashdod took a direct hit from a missile. But for some reason, the red alert alarm didn't go off. And the longshoremen, they kept on working on the cranes, kept on unloading the ships. Okay, so a barrage of rockets hit the igloo on the pier. They were away from it about a 15-minute. They had a big jolt, but they weren't hit. And it was such a tremendous barrage that it went right through the concrete. So if the alarm had gone off, the longshoremen would have been there, and they would have been on the way to the next world. Well, it wasn't their time yet. So Hashem, this one special time, the alarm didn't work. And by the alarm not working, that a dozen or so longshoremen, their lives were saved. So this is 2 rockets landed right on there. The 3rd rocket landed in the sea. But, nobody got hurt. So you see, if the alarm had functioned normally, like it should have, then there would have been bad news. So this malfunction, that's another product of Hashem's GPS, Hashem's magnificent, God's personal supervision that predominates all over everything. And we see this all times a day. You have to know, if the Gemara in Tractate Brochot tells us that if our flesh and blood eyes could see the number of lethal bacteria and lethal viruses floating around the air, we'd go crazy. But we'd realize that Hashem's magnificent divine providence is preserving our lives every moment of the day. When we can't see it, we believe it. And we believe it, we become much happier, much more appreciative, and Hashem gives us many more reasons to appreciate. And God bless for a wonderful month of Elul. All month long, we wish each other a inscription and signature in the Book of Life for wonderful new year 5786, which is another 3.5 weeks. And we look forward to seeing everyone every week. God bless.